Before we begin, hit subscribe, like this video, and drop a comment if you're ready to step into a world most people never see, because once you're inside, there's no easy way out. Chapter 1. The Inside World. The sirens cut through the night like knives. Red and blue lights bounced off concrete walls as police cruisers skidded to a halt outside Blackwater State Penitentiary, a maximum security prison buried deep in the desert. The call had come in at 2:17 a.m., an inmate found unresponsive in a maintenance corridor that officially didn't exist. No cameras. No witnesses. No explanation. By the time Lieutenant Marcus Hale stepped out of his vehicle, the body was already covered with a grey sheet. The prison yard stood frozen, spotlight scanning the razor wire as guards lined the perimeter with hands tight around their weapons. Something had gone wrong inside Blackwater, and everyone felt it. Hale crouched beside the sheet. The victim was Elias Crow, 36 years old, serving a 15-year sentence for armed robbery. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the maintenance wing. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his knuckles were torn raw, and there was a thin line of dried blood beneath his nose. No visible stab wounds. No gunshot. No obvious cause of death. "That's the third one this month," a corrections officer muttered behind him. Hale looked up sharply. "Third what?" The officer swallowed. "Third inmate found dead in a place he shouldn't have been." The prison warden, Cynthia Rowe, approached with forced composure. "Lieutenant, Blackwater is under control. These are isolated incidents." Hale stood slowly, his eyes never leaving the body. 3 isolated incidents don't happen by accident. He knew prisons. He'd built his career investigating crimes behind bars, places where silence was currency and fear kept the system running. What unsettled him wasn't the death itself. It was the location. Maintenance corridors were neutral ground. No gangs. No business. No reason for Crow to be there unless someone sent him. Or dragged him. As forensic teams moved in, Hale's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're looking in the wrong place. The prison isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed." Hale stared at the message, then slowly turned, scanning the shadows beyond the lights. Whoever sent it knew what was happening inside Blackwater, and they weren't afraid. 18 months earlier, Elias Crow had arrived at Blackwater with nothing but a transfer box and a reputation that wouldn't last a week. Crow wasn't a gang member. He wasn't protected. He wasn't dangerous enough to matter. He was exactly the kind of inmate who disappeared quietly. But within 3 months, Crow had moved units twice, landed a job in the kitchen, and somehow avoided the violence that swallowed weaker men. Guards noticed. So did the gangs. Inside Blackwater, power didn't come from strength alone. It came from organization. There were 4 major prison gangs controlling the inside world. Each one ruled sections of the prison like territories, with strict hierarchies and rules enforced more effectively than any guard's orders. They controlled drugs, protection, gambling, cell assignments, even which inmates lived long enough to parole. And above them all was something the administration refused to acknowledge. A council. Inmates whispered about it late at night, voices barely louder than breath. They called it the inside world, a shadow system where leaders from rival gangs negotiated, traded favors, and decided outcomes that guards only learned about after the damage was done. Crow had somehow gained access to that world. No one knew how. Detective Lena Morales arrived at Blackwater the following morning, her badge still unfamiliar to the guards who escorted her through steel gates and metal detectors. She'd been assigned to assist Hale after a pattern began emerging, one the Department of Corrections didn't want public. 3 deaths. No witnesses. No contraband found. No official motive. But Morales saw something else. "These aren't random," she said quietly as they reviewed photos in the warden's office. "Look at the timing. Each death happens right after a lockdown ends." Hale nodded. "Controlled movement." "Exactly. Someone's directing traffic." They pulled Crow's file. On paper, he was unremarkable. No known gang affiliations. No disciplinary write-ups. No enemies. "People like Crow don't survive long in places like this," Morales said. "Unless they're useful." They requested surveillance footage, knowing it would show nothing. Cameras didn't cover maintenance corridors. They never had. Convenient. As they stood to leave, Morales noticed something scratched faintly into the metal desk drawer beneath the warden's chair. 3 letters. K13. What's that? She asked. Warden Rowe's jaw tightened. Nothing. Hale crouched, tracing the marking with his finger. Looks like a cell designation. Rowe snapped, Lieutenant, you're crossing a line. Hale stood, meeting her eyes. If you think this stays inside your walls, you're wrong. Rowe said nothing, but her silence said enough. Later that day, Morales met with an inmate informant known only as Bishop, a lifer who'd survived 3 decades by knowing when to talk and when to disappear. They spoke through thick glass in the visitation wing. Bishop leaned forward, eyes sharp. You're asking about Crow. That means it's already too late. Too late for what? Morales asked. For pretending you're in charge. She pressed him. Who killed him? Bishop laughed softly. You don't get it. Nobody killed Crow. He was removed. By who? Bishop hesitated, then lifted his hand and tapped the glass twice. By the same people who decide who eats, who sleeps, and who makes it to parole. Morales felt a chill. The gangs. The gangs answer to something bigger now, Bishop said. They call it balance. Order. But it's control. He lowered his voice. Crow saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Something about the council. What council? Bishop leaned back. Ask yourself why rival gangs stopped killing each other 6 months ago. Morales left the interview shaken. Hale listened carefully as she recounted every word. A council, he repeated. That would explain the coordination. And the deaths, Morales added. Someone enforcing rules. Hale's phone buzzed again. Another text. You're getting warmer. Careful not to burn yourself. That night, Hale stayed late, reviewing old incident reports from Blackwater. Buried deep in archived files, he found something disturbing. A pattern stretching back years, unexplained transfers, sudden parole approvals, investigations quietly closed. Every file had one thing in common. Cell block K13. Officially, K13 didn't exist. It wasn't listed on any floor plan. But maintenance logs showed repeated repairs to a restricted sub-level beneath the east wing. Hale printed the documents and drove back to the prison under cover of darkness. He didn't notify the warden. A veteran guard named Tom Avery met him at the gate, uneasy but cooperative. Lieutenant, you don't want to be poking around down there. Open the door, Hale said. They descended through a service elevator that smelled of oil and rust. The doors opened onto a dim corridor lit by flickering fluorescents. No cameras. No signage. At the end of the hallway stood a reinforced steel door, unmarked, sealed with a biometric lock. Avery wiped sweat from his brow. This isn't in my jurisdiction. Hale stepped forward. Who has access? Avery hesitated. People who don't exist. Hale pulled out his phone, illuminating the doorframe. Etched into the concrete beside it were 3 faint letters. K13. His phone buzzed one last time. If you open that door, there's no going back. Hale looked at Avery. Open it. The lock clicked. The door creaked inward. And what they found inside would change everything they thought they knew about who really ran Blackwater State Penitentiary. The room beyond the steel door wasn't what Marcus Hale expected. There were no chains bolted to the walls, no blood-stained floors, no signs of torture or chaos. Instead, it looked almost orderly. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, illuminating a space that resembled a stripped-down conference room. A long metal table sat in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. On one wall hung a faded whiteboard filled with coded symbols and dates. On another, a corkboard layered with inmate photos, guard schedules, and handwritten notes pinned together with brutal precision. This isn't a cell, Avery whispered. This is an office. Hale stepped inside slowly, his instincts screaming. The air felt wrong, too controlled, too intentional. This wasn't a hidden corner inmates snuck into. This was a command center. Morales arrived minutes later, her face tightening as she took in the scene. "This is why the gangs stopped fighting," she said quietly. "They didn't disappear. They centralized." On the table lay a ledger. Hale flipped it open. Names. Numbers. Dates. Drug shipments marked as delayed. Assaults labeled approved. Transfers annotated with cryptic symbols. At the bottom of several pages was the same mark, a triangle enclosing 3 dots. "The council," Morales murmured. Before they could examine further, alarms blared through the corridor. Footsteps thundered above them. "They know we're here," Avery said, panic rising. Hale snapped the ledger shut and grabbed it. "We're leaving. Now." They barely reached the elevator before guards flooded the hallway, weapons drawn, confusion rippling through their ranks. Warden Rowe stood among them, her face pale with fury. "You had no authorization," she shouted. Hale held up the ledger. "And you had no intention of telling us this existed." Rowe's eyes flicked to the book, and for a moment, fear broke through her controlled exterior. "You don't understand what you've done," she said quietly. "Oh, I think we're just starting to," Hale replied. By morning, the ledger had vanished. Hale left it locked in his car overnight, sealed inside an evidence bag. When he returned, the window was intact, the locks untouched, but the bag was empty. No forced entry. No alarms triggered. Someone had access to everything. Morales slammed her fist onto the desk at headquarters. "This goes beyond inmates. Someone on the outside is helping them." Hale nodded grimly. "Or someone very high up." Internal Affairs refused to touch the case. The Department of Corrections issued a statement calling K-13 a misinterpreted maintenance space. The deaths were reclassified as medical emergencies pending further review. It was a cover-up. Then the first witness disappeared. Bishop was scheduled to testify under protective custody. Guards went to retrieve him from his cell at 6 a.m. By 6:03, his cell was empty. No broken locks. No signs of struggle. Just a neatly folded blanket on the bunk and a message scratched into the concrete wall. Balance restored. Morales stared at the photo in disbelief. They moved him without anyone noticing. Hale exhaled slowly. "Or they killed him and want us to think they moved him." Either way, the message was clear. The council was watching and responding. Hale dug into Elias Crow's past, pushing beyond prison records into sealed court documents. What he found changed everything. Crow had once been a confidential informant. 5 years earlier, before his conviction, Crow had worked with federal investigators to map organized crime networks moving contraband through private prisons. The operation collapsed after a leak exposed multiple informants. Crow vanished from the program and resurfaced months later as a defendant. Someone had burned him. Now, inside Blackwater, Crow had gotten close again, too close. He'd been placed in the kitchen, one of the most strategic jobs in the prison. Food shipments meant access. Access meant leverage. He was rebuilding a map, Morales said. Tracking who controlled what. Who answered to whom. "And the council found out," Hale replied. "They couldn't let him leave alive." As if on cue, another death hit the news. This time, it wasn't an inmate. Tom Avery's car was found off a desert road, engine running, driver's door open. Avery lay slumped over the wheel, a single gunshot wound to the chest. No weapon recovered. On the dashboard, written in dust with a fingertip, were 3 dots inside a triangle. The media descended on Blackwater, but every question hit a wall of rehearsed statements and legal threats. Privately, panic spread through the prison. Gangs grew quiet. Too quiet. Morales met with a former corrections officer named Rachel Dunn, who'd resigned abruptly 2 years earlier. They spoke in a diner miles from the prison, the hum of late-night traffic masking their words. "They offered me money," Dunn admitted, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. "To adjust schedules. Look the other way. I didn't even know who they were at first." "Who contacted you?" Morales asked. Dunn swallowed. "A lawyer. Said he represented a collective interest." He knew everything about my finances. My family. She slid a business card across the table. No name. Just a phone number and the triangle symbol. They're not just inmates, Dunn said. They have people everywhere. That night, Dunn's apartment caught fire. She survived. Barely. The fire marshal ruled it electrical. Hale knew better. Pressure mounted on Hale from above. He was advised, politely, then firmly, to step back. Funding for the investigation dried up. Access to Blackwater was revoked. Someone wanted this buried. Morales refused to quit. She worked nights, chasing paper trails. Finally, she found something no one else had noticed. Parole approvals. Dozens of inmates connected to rival gangs were being released early, all within a narrow time frame. They weren't reoffending. They weren't disappearing. They were organizing. These aren't random paroles, Morales said, spreading photos across the table. They're assembling something on the outside. Hale's jaw tightened. A continuation of the council. The inside world was spilling out. Then came the call. Warden Rowe was dead. She was found in her office, slumped behind her desk, no signs of forced entry. The official cause: suicide. But Hale saw the photo Morales sent him. On the underside of the desk drawer, freshly carved, were the same 3 letters. K13. And beneath them, a message written small and precise. You can't dismantle a system you benefit from. Hale felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Rowe hadn't been in control. She'd been managed. With official channels closed, Hale made a choice that would end his career if discovered. He leaked fragments of the case to an investigative journalist known for exposing institutional corruption. Within days, rumors exploded online. Hashtags trended. Questions multiplied. And inside Blackwater, everything changed. Lockdowns became constant. Inmates whispered of executions happening in plain sight. Men dragged away during showers, never returning. Guards started calling in sick. Fear crept through the concrete. Morales received a final message from an unknown number. You were warned. Attached was a photo. It showed Hale, standing in front of the K13 door. The timestamp was from 10 minutes earlier. Morales grabbed her coat, heart pounding. She called Hale. No answer. She sped toward Blackwater as storm clouds gathered overhead, lightning splitting the sky. When she arrived, the prison stood dark, emergency lights glowing faintly through the rain. The main gates were open. Unmanned. Inside, alarms wailed. Guards lay restrained, unharmed but unconscious. Doors hung open. Cells stood empty. The prison wasn't rioting. It was evacuating. Morales ran toward the east wing, dread rising with every step. She reached the service elevator and descended into the sub-level. The K13 door stood wide open. Inside, the conference room was empty, except for one thing. Marcus Hale's badge lay on the table, placed carefully at the center. And on the whiteboard behind it, written in bold, unmistakable letters, was a single sentence. The final vote has been cast. Morales felt her blood run cold. Because whatever the council was planning next, it wasn't staying behind bars. The first sign that the system was collapsing didn't come from Blackwater. It came from a quiet suburb outside Phoenix, where a former inmate, paroled 6 months early with no explanation, was found dead in his living room. No forced entry. No struggle. Just a single phrase written on the wall behind him in black marker. Out of balance. Within 48 hours, similar scenes appeared across 3 states. Different cities. Different victims. All former inmates. All men who had once held influence inside prison walls and then broken ranks on the outside. The press called it coincidence. Marcus Hale knew better. He was still alive. Barely. Hale woke up in a dark, concrete room with a splitting headache and the taste of iron in his mouth. His wrists weren't bound, but the door was locked from the outside. A single light flickered overhead. K13 wasn't just a room. It was a network. When the door finally opened, the man who stepped inside didn't look like a gang leader or a criminal mastermind. He wore clean clothes, wire-rimmed glasses, and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone used to being listened to. "My name doesn't matter," the man said. "But you can call me the facilitator." Hale pushed himself upright. "You run the council." The man smiled faintly. "No. I maintain it." He explained without arrogance, as if describing a natural law. Prisons were never meant to rehabilitate. They were pressure cookers. Chaos was inevitable, unless someone organized it. Years ago, violence inside Blackwater had begun to threaten profits, lawsuits, and political careers. So a solution emerged. Gang leaders were identified, controlled, and brought together. Incentives replaced bloodshed. Order replaced disorder. "We reduced murders by 40%, the facilitator said calmly. "Saved the state millions. Everyone benefited." "People died," Hale snapped. "People always die," the man replied. "The difference is whether their deaths mean something." Hale stared at him. "You killed Crow because he threatened the structure." "Yes," the facilitator said without hesitation. "And Bishop. And Avery. And Rowe." Hale felt the truth settle like a weight. Rowe wasn't in control. She was expendable. The facilitator nodded. She forgot her place. "What about me?" Hale asked. The man leaned closer. "You're here because you're useful." Outside, Detective Morales was fighting a war on two fronts. Public pressure had reached a boiling point. The leaked documents sparked congressional inquiries and internal investigations, but progress was slow, intentionally so. Every agency passed responsibility. Every hearing stalled. Then Morales received an encrypted email. Coordinates. A time. And a message. "If you want him alive, come alone." She broke every rule she'd sworn to uphold and drove into the desert before sunrise. The location was an abandoned intake facility once used during prison overcrowding. The gate stood open, sand creeping across cracked asphalt. Inside, she found Hale seated at a table, unharmed but exhausted. And standing behind him were three men. Not inmates. Not guards. Officials. A former deputy director of corrections. A private prison contractor. And the facilitator. Morales felt her stomach drop. "This isn't just Blackwater," she said quietly. The facilitator smiled. "It never was." He explained how the council extended beyond one prison, quietly shaping outcomes across multiple facilities. Transfers. Sentences. Paroles. Even court delays. A shadow bureaucracy that thrived because it worked. "You don't dismantle systems like this," he said. "You replace them." Morales raised her weapon. "Step away from him." The deputy director sighed. "Detective, think carefully. Expose this, and prisons riot. Gangs fracture. Violence spikes. Politicians panic. The public demands answers no one can give." The contractor added, "Order has a price." Hale looked at Morales. He knew what she was thinking. This wasn't a standoff. It was a choice. Morales lowered her weapon. Not in surrender, but in resolve. "You're right," she said. "The public can't handle the full truth." The men relaxed. "But they can handle enough." Before anyone could react, she slammed her phone onto the table and hit play. Audio filled the room. The facilitator's voice, recorded earlier. "We reduced murders by 40%. Crow was removed. Everyone benefited." Silence followed. Morales smiled grimly. "It's already uploading. Redundancy servers. Multiple outlets." The deputy director lunged for the phone. Too late. Sirens wailed in the distance. Hale stood. "You built a system so confident it thought it was untouchable," he said. "That's always the mistake." The facilitator's calm finally cracked. "You don't understand what comes next." Hale met his gaze. "Neither do you." The fallout was immediate and brutal. Arrests followed. Resignations. Emergency sessions. Blackwater was placed under federal oversight. Other facilities were flagged. The council, as it existed, was dismantled piece by piece. Officially. Unofficially, the violence returned. Gangs fractured. Power vacuums formed. Retaliation spread through cell blocks across the country. For every truth exposed, 2 more secrets surfaced. Hale resigned quietly. Morales stayed on, promoted and isolated in equal measure. Months later, a report crossed her desk. An inmate in a different state, no known affiliations, was found dead in a maintenance corridor. No cameras. No witnesses. On the wall beside him were 3 faint dots scratched into the concrete. Morales closed the file slowly. That night, she received a message from an unknown number. Balance isn't destroyed. It evolves. She stared at the screen, the weight of the truth pressing in. They had exposed the council. But they hadn't erased the need it filled. Somewhere inside the system, someone was already reorganizing. Already adapting. Already voting. And as Morales turned off her phone, one thought refused to leave her mind. They thought the inside world ended when the doors opened. But the truth was far worse. The walls were never the real prison. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. So hit subscribe, because some truths don't stay buried for long.